April 1945, Bavaria, Germany. The war's final breath hangs heavy over a devastated landscape where smoke still rises from bombed-out buildings and the acrid smell of gunpowder mingles with spring rain. Sergeant Thomas Archer steps off the half-track, his boots sinking into mud mixed with ash. Around him, his unit moves with practiced caution through the rubble of what was once a village. The mechanical sounds of war, distant artillery, idling engines, the metallic click of weapons being checked, create a symphony of destruction that has become Thomas's daily reality. He is 24 years old, though his eyes carry decades more. A mechanic from Ohio before the war, Thomas joined believing in clear lines between right and wrong. 4 years of combat have blurred those lines into something unrecognizable. Beside him walks Samuel Carter, the unit's interpreter. Samuel's German heritage makes him invaluable, but it also marks him with suspicion. He speaks little, translates less, and carries secrets in the space between languages. The village appears abandoned until they reach the church, a Gothic structure somehow still standing amid the destruction. Captain Richard Hayes raises his fist, signaling the unit to halt. Intelligence reports mention something here, something the SS left behind in their hasty retreat. Inside the church basement, they find them. 23 women huddled in the darkness like forgotten prayers. Their clothes are torn, their faces hollow with fear and starvation. Some are young, barely out of their teens. Others bear the marks of lives lived before this war reduced them to shadows. At the center stands Lena Müller. Thomas notices her immediately, not because she is beautiful, though beneath the grime and exhaustion he can see she once was, but because while every other woman shrinks from the American soldiers, Lena stands tall. Her blue eyes meet his with neither hope nor despair, but with calculation. She is measuring him, assessing threat and opportunity in the span of a heartbeat. Samuel steps forward, speaking soft German. The women flinch at the sound of their own language from an American uniform. Lena responds, her voice steady despite the tremor Thomas notices in her hands. The conversation is brief, tense. "They're prisoners," Samuel translates, his face carefully neutral. "The SS kept them here. Some are accused collaborators. Others," he pauses, choosing words carefully, "were used for intelligence purposes." Captain Hayes lights a cigarette, studying the women with the cold pragmatism of a man who has seen too much. "Secure them. We'll transport them to command for interrogation and identity verification. They stay under guard until we know exactly who and what they are." Thomas feels something twist in his gut. These are not soldiers. They are victims of a war that devoured everything in its path. Yet his orders are clear. Keep them contained. Treat them as potential enemies until proven otherwise. As the unit begins organizing the transfer, Thomas catches Lena watching him again. This time, her expression reveals something beneath the calculated facade. A desperate intelligence searching for one thread of humanity to grasp. He looks away, unable to meet those eyes. The rain begins to fall harder, drumming against the church's broken windows. In that moment, Thomas Archer does not yet know that his next decisions will define not just his own fate, but the lives of 23 women whose stories the war tried to erase. He does not know that the woman with calculating blue eyes carries secrets that could save or condemn them all. He only knows that something feels terribly, dangerously wrong. The women are moved to a makeshift holding area, a partially destroyed barn on the village outskirts. Thomas stands guard as night falls, watching shadows move behind the crude wooden slats. The April cold seeps through his uniform, but he barely notices. Inside, he can hear whispered German, fragments of conversation carried on the wind. Samuel sits nearby, smoking, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "You understand what they're saying?" Thomas asks quietly. Samuel exhales smoke slowly. "Some of it. They're scared, trying to figure out what happens next." "And the one who spoke to you, Lena?" Samuel's jaw tightens. "She's different, educated, speaks like someone who once had power." He pauses. "Or someone who learned to speak that way to survive." Through the slats, Thomas can see Lena distributing what little food the Americans provided. She moves with purpose, organizing the women, calming the younger ones who weep into their hands. Even here, even now, she leads. The next morning brings interrogations. Lieutenant Martin Keller arrives from intelligence, a man with sharp eyes and sharper questions. One by one, the women are questioned. Most can barely speak, traumatized into silence. Others tell fragmented stories of being arrested, accused of helping enemies, of being used. When Lena enters the interrogation room, the air changes. Thomas watches from the doorway as she sits across from Keller, her posture straight despite exhaustion. She answers questions in German, her voice steady, revealing nothing beyond what is asked. But Thomas notices something else, the way her hands rest flat on the table, perfectly still, the way her eyes never leave Keller's face. This is not a terrified prisoner. This is someone who has been interrogated before and learned how to navigate it. Hours later, Samuel finds Thomas checking the perimeter. "She told me something," Samuel says, his voice low. "After the interrogation. She waited until Keller left. Then she spoke to me in English, perfect English." Thomas stops walking. "What did she say?" "That she was forced to work for German intelligence. That they took her after her husband was executed for resistance activities. They gave her a choice, spy for them or watch her sister die." Samuel's hands shake as he lights another cigarette. "She claims she was feeding information back to Allied networks when she could. That she was trying to help us. You believe her?" "I don't know what I believe anymore, Thomas, but I know desperation when I see it. And I know that woman in there isn't just fighting for her life. She's fighting for something bigger." That night, Thomas volunteers for guard duty again. He stands in the darkness, listening to the whispered German, trying to reconcile what Samuel told him with his orders. Around midnight, Lena approaches the barn's entrance. She doesn't speak at first, just looks at him through the slats. When she finally does speak, it's in English, barely above a whisper. "You're wondering if I'm telling the truth." Thomas doesn't answer. "I don't blame you for doubting. In war, everyone lies to survive. But I need you to understand something, Sergeant." She presses closer to the slats, and in the moonlight, Thomas sees tears tracking through the dirt on her face. "I have done terrible things, things that will haunt me until I die. But every terrible thing I did hoping it would save someone. I need you to believe that." Before Thomas can respond, she disappears back into the shadows. He stands there until dawn, unable to shake the weight of her words, unable to shake the feeling that everything is about to change. Morning breaks grey and cold. Thomas hasn't slept, his mind churning with Lena's confession and the weight of decisions he doesn't yet know he'll have to make. Lieutenant Keller returns with a leather briefcase, his expression grim. He gathers Captain Hayes and the senior officers in what remains of the village administrative building. Thomas is ordered to stand guard outside, but through the broken window, he hears everything. "We found SS archives in a bunker 15 kilometers east," Keller's voice cuts through the morning air. "Documents the bastards didn't have time to burn." Papers shuffle. A long silence follows. "Jesus Christ," Hayes mutters. "The woman, Lena Müller, she's in here. Codename Nachtigall, Nightingale." Keller's voice carries a strange mixture of disgust and fascination. "She was an SS asset, recruited in 1942 after her husband's execution. They used her to infiltrate resistance cells in occupied France and Belgium." Thomas feels his stomach drop. "But there's more," Keller continues. "Cross-referencing with our own intelligence files shows she may have been a double agent. Several resistance operations she supposedly compromised actually succeeded. Information she reportedly gave the SS led to traps where German officers were killed instead of Allied operatives." "May have been," Hayes asks sharply. "The evidence is contradictory. Either she was playing both sides, or the SS discovered her betrayal, and these documents are fabricated to cover their own failures." Papers rustle again. "What's certain is that she's dangerous. She knows too much about both Allied and German operations. If the Soviets get their hands on her, then we hand her over to our intelligence services," Hayes interrupts. "Just let them sort out whose side she was really on. With all due respect, sir, that's a death sentence. You know how this works. She'll be interrogated, then disappeared. Clean hands, no witnesses." Thomas's hands tighten on his rifle. Through the window, he sees Keller pull out a photograph. There's something else. These other women, at least 6 of them, were also involved in intelligence work, some willing, most coerced. The SS was moving them east, probably to trade as assets or execute them before the Soviets arrived. Hayes exhales slowly. Orders. Transport them all to Munich. High security detention. They'll be processed there, interrogated properly. Then... Keller doesn't finish the sentence. The meeting ends. As the officers file out, Thomas catches Keller's eye. The lieutenant pauses. "You have a question, Sergeant." "Sir, what happens to them?" "After Munich." Keller studies him for a long moment. "That depends on what they know and what they've done. But between us, women who worked intelligence for the enemy, willing or not, rarely see 1946. He adjusts his cap. War doesn't leave room for grey areas, Archer. You'd do well to remember that. Thomas watches him walk away, his words echoing like artillery fire. That afternoon, Thomas receives his orders. Prepare the prisoners for transport at dawn, Munich. High security. No exceptions. He looks toward the barn where 23 women wait, unaware that their fates have already been decided by documents and suspicions and the brutal mathematics of war. Lena stands at the barn's entrance, watching him. Their eyes meet across the distance, and Thomas realizes he's standing at a crossroads where every direction leads to damnation. Thomas doesn't sleep that night either. He sits in the ruined remains of what was once someone's home, cleaning his rifle for the 3rd time, trying to organize thoughts that refuse to align. The orders are clear. At 600 hours, the women will be loaded onto trucks and transported to Munich. From there, they disappear into the machinery of military intelligence, interrogations, classifications, judgments rendered by men who've never looked into their eyes. Samuel finds him just after midnight. "You're thinking about doing something stupid," Samuel says, sitting down among the rubble. "I'm thinking about following orders." "Bullshit." "I know that look, Thomas. I've seen it before, on men right before they make decisions they can't take back." Thomas sets down his rifle. "What would you do?" Samuel is quiet for a long time. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of his own ghosts. "My grandmother was German, came to America in 1923. She had sisters who stayed behind. I don't know if they're alive or dead, collaborators or victims. I don't know if they had choices or if choices were taken from them." He looks toward the barn. "What I do know is that history won't remember nuance. It'll remember winners and losers, the saved and the condemned." "That's not an answer." "No," Samuel agrees, "but it's the truth." Thomas stands, his decision crystallizing like ice forming over water. "Gus, if someone wanted to help them escape, how would they do it?" Samuel's eyes widen. "Thomas, listen to me. How would they do it?" The silence stretches between them, thick with consequences. "The supply trucks," Samuel finally says. "They come through at 0400 for the morning run. In the confusion, in the dark. If someone cut the fence behind the barn, if someone left uniforms and civilian clothes where they could be found." He stops. "But you'd need time. And you'd need someone on the inside to organize it. Lena, she's the obvious choice. But Thomas, if you do this, if you help enemy intelligence operatives escape, that's not just disobeying orders. That's treason. They'll court-martial you. Best case, you spend the rest of your life in Leavenworth. Worst case, I know what worst case is." Inside the barn, Thomas can hear someone crying softly. A young woman, barely 20, sobbing in German. He doesn't need translation to understand grief. He thinks about his mother's letters, about the farm in Ohio waiting for him, about the life he was supposed to return to. He thinks about the oath he swore, about duty and honor and all the words that sounded so clear before the war taught him what they actually cost. Then he thinks about Lena's eyes in the moonlight, about 23 women who've already been condemned by documents and suspicions, about what it means to do the right thing when every option is wrong. "Get me wire cutters," Thomas says quietly, "and find civilian clothes. Anything that might fit." Samuel doesn't move. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Samuel nods slowly, then stands. "Then we better move fast. We have 4 hours until those trucks arrive." "We? You think I'm letting you commit treason alone?" "What kind of friend would that make me?" Despite everything, Thomas almost smiles. Then they begin planning the impossible. At 0200 hours, Thomas approaches the barn. The guard, Private Jenkins, a kid from Tennessee who's seen too much, looks at him with tired eyes. "Go get some coffee," Thomas tells him. "I'll take over." Jenkins doesn't argue. He's gone in 30 seconds. Thomas slips inside. 23 pairs of eyes turn toward him, reflecting lamplight like animals caught in the dark. Lena stands immediately, positioning herself between him and the others. "We don't have much time," Thomas says in English, then nods to Samuel, who translates rapidly into German. In 2 hours, supply trucks come through. There's a section of fence behind this barn that will be cut. Civilian clothes are hidden in the storage shed 30 meters north. The women stare at him, uncomprehending. It's too sudden, too impossible. Lena steps forward. "Why are you doing this?" "Because what happens in Munich isn't justice." Thomas meets her eyes. "You have 2 hours to organize them. Stay quiet. Stay together. When you hear the trucks, you move. They'll execute you for this." "Probably." Something passes across Lena's face. Gratitude, grief, understanding. She reaches out, her hand touching his arm for just a moment. "Thank you," she whispers. Then she turns, and in rapid German begins organizing the women with the efficiency of someone who's planned escapes before. Outside, Samuel works the wire cutters, the soft snip-snip barely audible over the wind. Thomas stands watch, every nerve screaming, every shadow a potential threat. At 03:45, Captain Hayes makes an unexpected round. Thomas's heart stops as Hayes approaches, his silhouette unmistakable in the darkness. "Sergeant Archer, everything secure?" "Yes, sir, all quiet." Hayes lights a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his weathered face. "You know, Thomas, I've been doing this for 3 years. I've learned to read men. I know when someone's about to do something they think is noble, but is actually just goddamn stupid." Thomas says nothing. "Those women in there, they're not your responsibility. Whatever happens to them, that's beyond your pay grade. Beyond mine, too." Hayes takes a long drag. "You understand what I'm saying?" "Yes, sir." Hayes studies him for a long moment. Then, inexplicably, he checks his watch. "I'm going to check the east perimeter. That'll take me about 30 minutes. When I get back, I expect to find everything exactly as it should be." He walks away, disappearing into the darkness. Thomas stands frozen, processing what just happened. Did Hayes just... No time to think. At 0400, right on schedule, the supply trucks rumble through, their engines masking other sounds. Thomas gives the signal. 2 short whistles. Behind the barn, shadows begin to move. The women slip through the cut fence like ghosts, Lena leading them with practiced precision. They move in pairs, using the trucks and buildings as cover, changing into civilian clothes behind the storage shed. A young woman stumbles, her foot catching on wire. The metallic clang seems impossibly loud. Everyone freezes. A guard shouts from the north end. "Go!" Thomas hisses. "Feel it now." The women scatter into the pre-dawn darkness, disappearing into the forest beyond the village. Lena is the last to leave. She pauses at the tree line, looking back one final time. Their eyes meet across the distance. Then she's gone, swallowed by shadows and trees and the desperate hope of survival. Thomas stands in the empty barn, listening to boots running, voices shouting, the machinery of consequence grinding into motion. Samuel appears beside him. "So it's done." "Yeah," Thomas says quietly. "It's done." They wait for what comes next, knowing there's no going back from what they've just done, knowing they wouldn't change it, even if they could. Dawn breaks with the sound of whistles and shouting. Captain Hayes stands in the empty barn, his face unreadable as officers swarm around him, their voices overlapping in confusion and accusation. The cut fence, the missing prisoners, the impossible breach of security. Thomas and Samuel stand at attention in what remains of the village square, surrounded by armed guards. Lieutenant Keller paces before them, his fury barely contained. 23 high-value prisoners, gone. Keller's voice is ice, and the 2 men on guard duty claim they saw nothing, heard nothing, did nothing. "Sir, Thomas begins. "Shut your mouth, Sergeant." Keller steps closer, his eyes burning. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Those women were intelligence assets. Some of them carried information that could have saved Allied lives. Others were war criminals who deserved to face justice. With respect, sir, we don't know which was which. Keller's fist connects with Thomas's jaw before anyone can react. Thomas staggers but doesn't fall, tasting blood. You don't get to make that determination, Sergeant. That's not your job. Your job is to follow orders. Keller turns to Hayes. And I want them both court-martialed. Today. Hayes lights a cigarette with deliberate slowness. On what evidence, Lieutenant? We have a security failure. We have incompetence, maybe, but treason requires proof. They were the only guards who saw nothing in the confusion of a busy camp at shift change during a rainstorm. Hayes exhales smoke. Unless you have witnesses or physical evidence connecting them to the escape, you have assumptions. The argument continues, but Thomas barely hears it. His mind is elsewhere, following 23 women through the Bavarian forest, hoping they've found shelter, hoping Lena's intelligence training is enough to keep them alive. The interrogation lasts 3 days. They separate Thomas and Samuel, asking the same questions different ways, searching for contradictions. Thomas sticks to his story. He saw nothing, heard nothing, failed in his duty through incompetence rather than malice. On the 3rd day, Keller throws a file across the interrogation table. We found 2 of them, shot trying to cross into Switzerland. He watches Thomas's face for reaction. The younger ones talked before they died, said an American soldier helped them escape, said there was a woman who organized everything. Thomas feels something crack inside his chest but keeps his expression neutral. Lena Müller, Keller continues, still missing. Along with 21 others, the 2 we found, 16 and 17 years old. They bled out in the snow because you thought you were being noble. The words land like bullets. That night, Thomas sits in the stockade, staring at stone walls. Samuel is 2 cells down, silent. The weight of those 2 deaths presses down on Thomas like earth on a coffin. Did he save anyone, or did he just trade different deaths for the ones waiting in Munich? A guard approaches, the same Private Jenkins from Tennessee. He slips a folded paper through the bars without speaking, then walks away. Thomas unfolds it with shaking hands. Inside, in careful handwriting, 21 made it across. The 2 who died saved 3 others from German patrols. They were heroes. So are you. There's no signature, no return address, just those words and a pressed wildflower. Thomas sits in the darkness, holding the paper, and for the first time in 3 days, he allows himself to weep, not for what he lost, but for what those 23 women gained, their lives, their freedom, their chance to be more than victims of someone else's war. Outside, the war grinds on toward its inevitable conclusion. Inside, Thomas Archer learns what it means to pay the price for doing what's right. The court-martial never happens. 3 weeks after the escape, Germany surrenders. In the chaos of victory and demobilization, the case of 23 missing prisoners becomes a footnote, filed away with thousands of other wartime irregularities. Lieutenant Keller is reassigned to the Pacific. Captain Hayes signs transfer papers without comment. Thomas and Samuel receive dishonorable discharges, punishment without spectacle, shame without ceremony. They're sent home on different ships, their friendship another casualty of the choices they made. Thomas returns to Ohio in August 1945. His mother cries when she sees him, not from joy but from recognition. Her son left 4 years ago, but a stranger returned. The farm is exactly as he remembers, yet completely foreign. The mechanical work he once loved feels meaningless. His hands, trained to repair engines of war, struggle to remember peace. The nightmares come regularly, not of combat, but of those 2 girls bleeding in the snow, of Lena's eyes in the moonlight, of the weight of decisions that seemed so clear in the moment and so impossibly complicated in retrospect. Years pass. Thomas marries, has children, builds a quiet life. He never speaks about the war, not even when his son asks about the medals he keeps in a drawer, never worn. The dishonorable discharge papers stay hidden, a secret shared only with his wife, who loves him anyway. 22 years after the war. The letter arrives on a Tuesday, forwarded through the Red Cross. The envelope is worn, postmarked from Geneva. Inside, a single page written in English. Dear Sergeant Archer, We do not know if this letter will reach you, or if you remember us. 22 years ago, you gave 23 women their lives back. We scattered across the world, some to America, others to South America. A few remained in Europe under new names. We have built families. We have raised children who will never know the fear we carried. We have lived lives that were supposed to end in Munich. The two who died, Maria and Sophie, they knew the risks. In their final moments, they led German patrols away from the rest of us. They chose their deaths so we could choose our lives. You gave us that choice. We wanted you to know that your sacrifice was not in vain. We wanted you to know that we remember, that we teach our children to remember, that the courage of one American soldier echoes through generations he will never meet. Thank you does not suffice. But it is all we have. With eternal gratitude, those you saved, below the typed text, 21 signatures, no names, just initials and cities, Buenos Aires, New York, Melbourne, São Paulo. At the bottom, in handwriting he recognizes from a note passed through prison bars, out of Zurich. Thomas sits at his kitchen table, reading the letter again and again as afternoon light fades to evening. His hands shake, from age now, not just memory. His wife finds him there hours later, tears tracking down his weathered face. "Are you all right?" she asks. He looks at the letter, at the signatures, at the simple initial that represents everything he sacrificed and everything he saved. "I am now," he says. That night, Thomas dreams of Bavaria for the last time, but instead of blood and snow, he dreams of 23 women walking into sunlight, finally free.